We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Rock Talk, brought to you by GraniteRock.com, New Hampshire's conservative website. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteRock.com. Rock Talk. Welcome back to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteRock.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site. I'm here with Skip Murphy, co-founder of said site.
Good morning.
And co-host almost every single week.
Almost, as long as the weather will allow me to get off the mountain, which it was kind of iffy. Like I told Steve, first thing this morning, it was, I thank God every single Saturday morning with weather like this, where the roads are nice and black icy, for four-wheel drive and second gear to come off the mountain. But I'm here.
Hi.
Let me start off with this. In yesterday's political scoop by James Pindle at WMUR TV's site, political standing for February 21st, 2014. This made me very happy to read this. He has a section where he asks questions. He has questions where he says who he believes the politicos who are up and politicos that are down. And on the downside, he said Chuck Morse and Jeb Bradley, they will continue to be on their own island politically for a while. It's not like the Republicans voted them off the island. They willingly put themselves on Purgatory Island. With this week's news that the Manchester City Republicans put out a
resolution. It's
a
right
resolution.
Here.
Go ahead, read it.
For a quick, just so that you know, we're talking about the expansion of Medicaid being embraced by the New Hampshire Senate Republicans, and Chuck Morse and Jeb Bradley, who led the charge. And they created a bill where they said, we're going to embrace this $2.4 billion or whatever it is under whatever circumstances. It doesn't make a difference because it's still a bad thing. Anyway, we've been talking about it. We have a commercial that I played before the show from Strong New Hampshire. AFP's against it. Most of the grassroots groups are against it. In fact, I think they all are. And a large number of just general wandering around Republicans are against it. And everybody's been coming out broadsiding the heck out of the issue because we have lots of reasons for being against it. And now we have town and county committees coming out and saying, while some Republican senators have declared their support for this bill, the average Republican voter opposes Medicaid expansion and realizes that it could ultimately lead to a new form of a broad-based tax for our state. As a committee, we felt it was important to send a message to all the Republican senators by reaffirming our opposition to this damaging bill. This is from Tammy Simons?
Yes.
Okay. The chair of the committee. The resolution is as follows. Whereas the Manchester Republican Committee finds that the Republican Party platform clearly opposes the Federal Affordable Care Act and the expansion of Medicaid in any form. Whereas certain efforts of the General Court, which would accept expanded Medicaid funding, unavoidably conflict with our Republican Party platform. Whereas the Manchester Republican Committee finds that accepting some expanded Medicaid funding now will inevitably result in the adoption of full expanded Medicaid in the near future. Resolved that the Manchester Republican Committee declares its support of the Republican Party platform, which opposes the Federal Affordable Care Act and the expansion of Medicaid in any form, including efforts of the General Court to accept any expanded Medicaid funds. 2. Instructs the committee officers to inform the New Hampshire Republican Party, the New Hampshire State Senate, and the New Hampshire State House of this resolution, and urges all Manchester Republican Committee members to make this decision known to all of our local elected officials.
And indeed, Rockingham County's Republican Committee did something similar to that. We've been saying it all along that this is a really, really bad idea. And news has come to me that one of the reasons why they're doing this, that would be Jeb Bradley and Chuck Morse, is that they simply want to take it off the political table so that they cannot be beat about the head and shoulders by the Democrats in the upcoming elections. And I listen to that kind of thing, and I look at the D.C. Republicans who basically gave a blank check to Obama and his other progressive socialists in D.C. to spend whatever they want, forget about the debt limit that our kids and grandkids are going to be responsible for. They're about to do the same thing on amnesty, which, both of those issues at the federal level are exactly what the Democrats want to push. And they're saying, well, we're just taking it off the table. The Democrats are so smart. Just threaten to call them bad names, and they can get the Republicans to cave and just carry out their own agenda. And they're laughing because now they don't have to lift a finger, and now the base is going to go after these Republicans. And we see a duplicate. I've said for years that what goes on in D.C. is happening here in Concord, our state capital here in New Hampshire. And it's always been the Democrats. Now I see the Republicans doing the same thing. Oh, we give up. We wave the white flag because we don't want to be called bad names. So we'll just give you what you want and just leave us alone. And the Democrats are going, okay, what's the next thing we can do this with? It's like, why are the Republicans just giving them a club to beat them with? I just don't get it, Steve.
Well, there aren't being Republicans. What is the point of having two parties if you're just going to give the other party everything they want?
And that's the point we've been saying. What does this party stand for? And a lot of people are starting to say, the upper level Republican elite get really upset when they hear that not a dime's worth of difference. Well, there's three concrete examples, rather large, country-changing events that the Republicans have acted just like the Democrats. And then they get mad when we say there's not a dime's worth of difference. They get mad when I call them the junior partners of the Democrats. They get mad when I call them the lackeys, the least lackeys of the welfare state. My gosh, all you got to do is go out and buy a copy of Steve's Republican Repair Kit. Get yourself a spine and a couple of real brassy ones. And stand up for what you say you believe in instead of caving just to save your own puny political careers.
Well, here's the irony in all this. It will be the end of their political careers.
Well, as Pindle said, they're on their own island, and right now, I'll admit it, I've been trying in all of my writings about Medicare expansion and trying to sneak it into everything that I've done. These Republicans need to be culled out from the rest of us. They need to be put out, made an example of, to say, if you're going to be a Republican like this, that's why I'm getting emails from people saying, I've had it. You've made me not to care. You've basically put the question in my mind as to why should I put my hard work, my small amount of time that I have left over from every day, and some of my hard-earned cash, why should I give it to you when you're going to go do something that the Democrats want you to do? That's nuts. And people are starting to say, no more. I had one person specifically say, when it comes down to the race between Carol Shea Porter and Frank Ginta, even though he's been a long, long time Republican, he's going to leave it blank. The Republican Party, I think, even with all this talk of another wave coming up because of Obamacare, I don't think the Republicans are going to do as well as what they think they're going to, because people are starting to say, I may not leave the party, or I might, but I'm at least going to send a message and not do a thing.
I don't think they're going to do as well in New Hampshire as they think. I get the sense that they believe that they're going to ride this wave no matter what they do. And obviously that's not true. And even if Pindell's reporting it, then, you've got to say, the grassroots is pissed. We are not happy about this.
And they didn't take the lesson. And I hate to keep beating this point, but people were not happy. The base of Frank Ginta's voter base in 2010 was not happy with what he did when he went down to D.C. They feel betrayed, and they feel that he did not ante up on the promises to cut the spending when he could have. And look what happened in 2012. He lost. The Republicans stayed home, or they voted for the Libertarian Party. And I believe that was a message. Whether or not he has learned that lesson remains to be seen. I know he's not coming back to the Tea Party 912er type community and trying to make amends. Instead, he's doing like a lot of the D.C. Republicans are doing, and he started his own business council and trying to run with the business crowd, just like the D.C. Republicans are trying to run with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They've switched base, and who knows? Money can say an awful lot, but money doesn't vote.
Yeah, but the base votes in primaries.
Oh, yes, we do.
So they need to realize that they have to get past the primary.
Or the base won't vote in the primary.
Well, if there's an option, they might. There are a lot of races, like at the state level. It's important that we get people out.
Right.
That we get, like in particular, in reference to the state Senate, that we get candidates out that are going to primary some of these Republicans soon. We have other candidates that we need to support. Kevin Average running against, he announced he's running in Nashua, state senator.
Good.
Against some Democrat wingnut. I forget which one.
Okay, and obviously Andrew Hemingway is now running for governor.
Andrew's running for governor.
Although the establishment seemed to be all giddy about Dean Kamen's leader for his
Walter
foundation.
Havenstein, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a nice post about that. That got a lot of play. I was pretty happy with that. For those of you who are familiar with these things, you would be, because I mean the Republican Party has this old white guy 1%er persona, and my major point, of course, was that Andrew's younger, he's tech savvy, he's kind of new, fresh face, cutting edge. I mean, he's been around. People know who he is inside the party, maybe not so much outside, but they're familiar with him, and he's coming at this with a very open-minded, pro-liberty, pro-small state, pro-New Hampshire kind of a thing. And I had asked initially when he announced that same day, will the NHGOP be happy to have somebody like Andrew, or will they go fishing for somebody else? With the idea that if they could find a couple somebodies, they might be able to get the moderate they want for governor through the primary process and have them run against Maggie Hassan. And the first person that they go fishing for is this guy, who happens to be extremely wealthy. He's a political insider. He's well known. He writes checks to the party. And he's basically the old white 1%er type. I'm like, if you're worried about your image problem and you talk about how your inability to connect with young voters, college age women, tech-savvy voters, why would you go out and look for a guy? What?
Sit forward so you can be back in camera range.
Oh.
Thank you.
Hi. Sorry, a little congestion this morning. Why would you do that unless you just can't? Well, Medicaid expansion. Maybe that's my fall back on that. The same party that would do that and do nothing to stop it is probably the same party that would just make the same mistakes at the state level with gubernatorial candidates. Sorry.
I'll go cynical. It's what's worked for them in the past, mostly.
Not anytime recently.
Well, they think so. They're always looking for a self-funder, because the NHGOP, stop it. Just stop it.
Please proceed.
The NHGOP is just poor as church mice. The only people who are poorer in New Hampshire politically, as far as money is concerned, are us activists, what it really comes down to, with very few examples or exceptions. So they're always looking for somebody who can fight against the big flood of money that's going to come into the state, because Ray Buckley's the head of the Democrat Party here in New Hampshire, is really good about bringing those dollars in, along with all of the Zandra Rice Hawkins of Progress, Granite State Progress, or Progress Now, or whatever their name is.
New Hampshire Citizen Action, all those groups.
Yeah, all of those groups that are funded by progressives who basically
from out of the state
won't leave us alone. They have to do the cookie cutter. We will force you to be all in. You will be like us, or like the Democrats said at their convention.
Convinced the Senate Republicans.
Yeah, government is the thing that we all belong to. The problem is they don't want it. They don't want to allow us to make it voluntary. They want to be coercive. But anyways, it's just a case where they don't have the money. If somebody steps forward with an R next to their name, which that's the definition of Gene Chandler's good Republican, if you've got dollar signs next to the R, or a few dollar signs, that makes you an even better Republican. It doesn't matter what your stances are, just that you've got an R and lots of dollar signs. And that's what kills this party. It really does, because we try to I mean, you and I, Granite Grok, all of the Groxers, and a lot of our activist friends of Granite Grok, believe in the platform. Not so much the platform, but the ideals expressed by that platform. Conservatism, liberty and individual liberty and freedom. And that's what we're striving for. And yet we're seeing more and more the GOP just drifting away. And as much as I want to say, let's take it over from the inside, I keep wondering, can we? Although, another interesting political event of the week, it's my understanding that Thursday at Liberty Forum, Aaron Day, who is the chair of the RLCNH, decided to take on a run for the NHGOP chair position, now being held by Jennifer Horn. And simply for one of the main reasons is that she expressed approval of Medicaid expansion here in the state, the live free or die state of New Hampshire. And I'm thinking to myself, and I've told her this to her face, if anybody here in New Hampshire is responsible for protecting the Republican brand and protecting the Republican platform and its ideals, it should be the chair of the party. And there she is expressly saying, well, I know that the plank says we're against Obamacare, but yeah, we can do Medicaid expansion, which is made possible by Obamacare.
Okay, 9:30, Darren McKinney from the American Tort Reform Association will be with us to talk about New Hampshire being added to their watch list as a judicial hellhole. Ed Nail's going to join us at 10 o'clock to talk about some new vote fraud news, and Warren Ray, the author of Shadow Patriots, will be on the phone at 9:30. We're going to take 67 seconds, and we will be right back.
Obamacare has been a disaster for New Hampshire families. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have already lost their insurance, and countless more are being forced into part-time work. Now, the New Hampshire Senate wants to make things even worse by expanding Medicaid coverage as part of Obamacare. That move could force an additional 20,000 people off of their current plans and onto Medicaid. Shortly, the Senate will be voting on Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, Senate Bill 413. The Heritage Foundation says Medicaid expansion will cost New Hampshire taxpayers $126 million more. What's worse, the expansion will increase emergency room usage by 40%, meaning longer wait times and even higher costs. Stop the Senate from making a costly mistake. Call your state senator and tell them to vote no on SB 413. Go to strongnh.com to find your senator's phone number today. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Okay. If I got the hours wrong, Warren Ray will be with us at 10:30. Sorry. And Darren McKinney will be with us at 9:30. If I got that backwards. Sorry. I don't know what this throat thing is I have going on. Make sure you use line 2. Line 2 works better. Line 2. Line 2 works better. We don't have to do it yet. We got time. We have plenty of time. So,
your wish is my command.
And I'll turn that on. For those of you listening, happily, Liberty Forum is continues to go on today at the Crown Plaza in Nashville. Please mind the ducks. And tomorrow...
And remember, there's a vigil for the ducks tomorrow.
There is a vigil for the ducks, yes. It's important that you attend the vigil.
Yes.
I think that could be the most important.
Yes, the ducks that were killed by Democrat Majority Leader David Campbell in a drunken drive-through of the duck crowd there. What's a crowd of ducks called again? Flock?
Flock, probably.
Okay. Yeah, he just wantonly drove through
Somebody email Skip and tell him what the duck thing, the herd of ducks is. Tomorrow in Concord, there's a 223 rally. It's in Concord, yes?
It is in Concord at the State House, 12 to 2. There's a long line of speakers, of which I have to say I am humbled to be have been asked to
It's
speak.
going to be a good speech, I can see.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. When I get when I tend to look down, though, something comes over me, and I generally speak fairly well.
I've heard you speak. You do okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You do fine. You do well. You do better than I would. Heck, that's not hard to.
We'll
to
have
do.
cameras rolling, and again, this is I look at it as it's being set up as a Second Amendment rally in defense of the right to own and bear arms. I look at it as they're all interconnected. And I hope that people don't see this sort of like the NRA does, where, well, we only do the Second Amendment. No, we do all of the amendments, because every single one of them is under attack by this progressive/socialist administration. And we know that because we look at what they were trying to do with the FCC invasion into newsrooms of radio, TV, and newspapers, where they wanted to do a study, and I think they've put it off for a little bit now, but the intent is, well, how do you decide what kind of stories you do? Now, this is a government official coming in, and when they do that, you start thinking, am I going to be able to keep my license to keep broadcasting, or do I have to do like they've done in Venezuela and other banana republics? I'd better do what these guys say, or I'm going to lose my license. It's a very chilling issue of free speech.
I was just thinking about something I was going to write about yesterday, and I can't find what it was, but it had something to do with the Second Amendment. And now I can't find it, which means I thought about writing it, but I didn't write it. So, yeah, please, by all means, come to the 223 rally tomorrow in Concord. Hopefully get a good crowd.
Yeah, where we use both our First and Second Amendment rights.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's how it works around here.
And we'll be looking for the Democrat trackers as well.
Oh, they'll be there. That guy that always shows up will probably be there. He's probably listening right now.
Yeah. Well, so is the FCC probably.
They can listen all they want.
Yes.
That's fine.
And if they want to come in and ask us about our news philosophy, trust me, we'll give you an earful.
We will. We're very upfront about our news philosophy.
And our biases.
That's the beauty of it. See, people can't say we're being biased, because we're intentionally biased. We are very clear-cut, hard-charging, gun-toting, right-wing. How much clearer do we have to make it?
All you got to do is look.
It's right there on the camera.
New Hampshire's leading fire-breathing, hard-charging, gun-toting, outspoken, rabble-rousing, freedom-loving blog site. We couldn't fit the Mountain Dew drinking part in.
Well, you're the only one who drinks that, so that wouldn't really...
That would be true.
No.
So anyways, what's the other news of the week?
We got a lot of news this week. The New Hampshire ski industry has contributed a record-breaking $1.15 billion to the state economy in 2012-2013, according to the Institute for New Hampshire Studies at Plymouth State University. The title of my blog post is, Jean Sahin said global warming would affect our winter tourism. She was right.
Yeah,
she
just not the way she
exactly.
thought.
She declared that we would be in trouble, that we'd have problems because we wouldn't have enough snow, and that the leaves would be horrible in the fall, and she's been wrong about everything, and that was news. The proposed cell phone ban bill that would make it illegal for you to talk with the phone next to your face, but you could talk with it anywhere else in your car, is still floating around the State House. We need to kill that sucker off.
Yeah, and I love the point that you have made several times over, and it really is the reality community that the Democrats say that they are, the party that believes in science that they say that they are. I've seen the stats, and I believe what you said. Well, all of a sudden, the accident rates due to cell phone usage seems to have been blown away and hidden somewhere. But I remember putting those. I think I've got the stats somewhere up on Granite Rock, because I used to put that up. Cell phone usage as the cause of distracted driving is way down on the list, and yet that's the thing that they want to get rid of. Now, texting, still a low number, but yeah, I can see doing that. But it shows that the Democrats have to explicitly do every single sin that they see. You just can't say, let's make it somewhat broad and say distracted driving. There's lots of stuff for distracted driving. There's turning on the radio, changing the channel, changing your GPS, trying to find the hamburger that you set down on the seat next to you. Screaming at the kids, trying to get the kids from pulling your hair as you're driving along, or what I used to do sometimes when I was small. Hi, Mommy, can you still see? Putting my hands over her eyes at 80 miles an hour. She was not a happy camper about that.
They're coming to get you. Yeah.
I mean, that's
what kids do that.
Yes. Well, now that was before there were seat belts.
Yeah, that's true.
In the station wagon, you could play in that big back end there. Have lots of fun.
And they didn't die.
I did not die.
No, nobody. That was
Nope.
It wasn't. No, see, I remember metal strollers. I remember, you couldn't have one of those now.
There's a lot of things that the nanny state has decided we must take all risk out of life. And that's really what it comes down to. Progressives believe that no one should ever suffer a bad consequence. and they're going to make damn sure that we don't have the freedom to even try to do that.
Which ties in very nicely to what the Senate Republicans in New Hampshire are doing.
Well, there is a bad outcome. They've adopted the same philosophy.
They're wrapping themselves in bubble wrap.
No, because here's the downside. The Democrats and New Hampshire State Republican Senators Jeb Bradley and Chuck Morris are trying to say, we're going to protect the victimhood, those that society has picked upon and shoved to the bottom of the pile. Go with me on this one. The problem is, they always say, well, we're going to give you something. Well, government, they very conveniently never say, when we give something to one set of people, we have to take away from another. Now, already they've skewed the premium rates for Obamacare so that, especially with the young, you're paying lots of money for no care whatsoever. So they choose the cheapest policies, which raise the deductibles up. So if you go, say, $300 a month for an insurance policy, that's $3,600 a year, and then you've got a $10,000 deductible upon that. So now you're paying $13,000 before you can actually get any kind of benefit out of your health insurance. That's all nothing but wealth transfer from one group to another.
My point was that they were bubble wrapping themselves against the pointy sticks of the Democrats if they didn't do what the Democrats told them they were going to give them hell for.
And what I just said still applies because
it does still apply, yeah.
We're going to come after them with pitchforks.
Yeah, lots of pointy sticks.
Yes. So
we've been doing that. I don't know if you've noticed. If you'd like to see the pointy sticks, go to graniterock.com. You can also see them on our Facebook page at Granite Rock. Just look it up and join it and like it and read. Follow the links. We don't just post our stuff, mostly, but there's other things there that you can poke around at. And, of course, you can check out cnht.org, as we always recommend, because they allow us to use this space here. And please see what they do. Make a donation. There's other groups that work out of this building and this office suite, and you should check that out as well. Support the people who are doing the dirty work.
Correct. And, by the way, you could give us a donation, and I will tell you right now, none of it ever goes into our pocket. You're looking on the live stream, you see some of the equipment that we have here. Some of it is behind you. There is lots of other equipment that we use for when we go to do different events around the state. And trust me, all we want to do is to up our production values. So any money that comes in either pays for the server or the bandwidth costs or goes right into more equipment.
Yeah, and that's really what it's all about. This is a not-for-profit enterprise.
Oh, believe me, it's not.
It's actually going the other direction. It's a anti-profit enterprise. It's an expensive hobby. This part's expensive. So any support you can give us, we appreciate it, and we will not use it for our own betterment. We'll just use it for stuff. And I'm Steve. I'm here with Skip. And this is Rock Talk. We'll be right back with Darren McKinney.
Turned off or tuned out recently? Can't believe what you see or hear these days? We have the show for you. It's all about taking control through understanding what's happening. Dr. Julianne Cooper, founder and president of Liberty Harbor Academy, hosts Carpe Diem, New Hampshire's first culture and education show on WSMN Radio 1590. Longtime history professor, entrepreneur, and cultural commentator Dr. Cooper will discuss what's happening in and to American culture and education. From pop culture to higher education, Dr. Cooper will help you make sense of the world. So, seize the day. Listen to Carpe Diem with Dr. Cooper every Tuesday from 11 to noon.
Steve McDonald here. Molly Shaheen, Senator Jean Shaheen's daughter, has a very expensive LA apartment where she lives and works, but for some strange reason, she voted here in New Hampshire. Elena Biden, niece to the man a heartbeat away from the presidency. Well, she never lived in New Hampshire at all, and she voted here and went back home. New Hampshire Democrat Emma Roos invited her adult children to leave their homes in Virginia, Washington, D.C. to claim they lived in New Hampshire to vote last November, and they went back home. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, vice chair of the New Hampshire Democrat State Party, she had a whole bunch of people who aren't from here living in her home, including a paid congressional staffer and an ACLU lawyer from Arkansas. They don't live here. They all claim to be claiming to live here just so they can vote here and then leave. That's not all the Democrats who showed up to steal your votes and then leave, but that'll get you started. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Grok Talk is 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com. But don't limit yourself to Grok Talk. Check us out at GraniteGrok.com. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter by searching Granite Grok.
Grok Talk.
Welcome back to Grok Talk. Coming to you as always from beautiful Concord, New Hampshire, where it is clear and sunny and warming up a little bit. We've earned ourselves a break from the bitter cold that we've been experiencing for, seems like forever and ever.
It definitely is a case we need a little bit of it. I looked out in my yard, and as my dog wrapped herself around the tree, I know that we've got a bunch of snow because it was up over my knee.
It was getting really, really, really deep.
Starting to. Well,
now it's rained a little, so it's kind of gone down a little bit. Now it's just icy and deep.
Yes, when I tell my coworkers out in lovely and warm San Diego I have to go rake my roof, the silence at the other end of the teleconference is deafening.
Rake your roof?
Yes.
For leaves? Palm fronds? What's the cause of that? Oh, it's snow. I've got 2 feet of snow on my roof. That's my problem. Well, talking about getting into it deep, and we've got a new guest with us today, Darren McKinney, who is with the American Tort Reform Association, ATR Foundation, and they put out I'm really, really loud all of a sudden. There we go. Let me turn that down a little bit. They put out a document it's a report, and it identifies judicial hellholes, and New Hampshire has earned itself a spot on the watch list.
Great.
As a judicial hellhole. So I'd like to welcome to the program Darren McKinney. Darren, how you doing?
Pretty good, Steve. Thank you very much for having me.
Great to have you. All right, so for our listeners who aren't going to be maybe not familiar with what you guys do, why don't you give us a brief overview of what ATR does, and then we'll talk about how New Hampshire got where it is.
We've been in business, so to speak. We're a nonprofit here in Washington, a trade association. We've been in action since 1986. And in very broad terms, we work at the State House level and in Congress to do what we can legislatively, as well as some other means by which to contain, to the extent possible, the parasitic plaintiff's bar in this country, which we believe too often erodes our economic competitiveness, erodes the public's respect for the rule of law, and arguably even more importantly, erodes America's long-standing and traditional sense of personal responsibility. Our annual Judicial Hellholes report has, for 12 years now, sought to identify troubled jurisdictions where judges particularly, because, I mean, look, you can't hate, I suppose you could, but whether you hate a trial lawyer for greedily trying to make as much money as he or her can with meritless lawsuits, ultimately it's the judges who are responsible for what juries get to hear by way of evidence and what they don't get to hear. So we try to focus most of our reporting in the Judicial Hellholes report on troubled judges, and as you suggested in your introduction, Superior Court Judge Peter Fauver made our watch list this year with the MTBE litigation that's rather noted up there.
Before we get into this, what do you guys use as benchmarks for making your determinations? What are the things that you look for? Obviously, this is a big case that we're going to talk about in a minute. It doesn't make any sense at all, but when you're looking at everybody, what are the things that you guys look at that you rate these states by? Well,
our principal criterion and definition of a judicial hellhole is a jurisdiction, a civil court jurisdiction. And mind you, we're not talking anything about criminal law here. It's all civil law. Is a civil court jurisdiction where judges systematically apply or fail to apply rules and procedures that disadvantage defendants, and typically these are out-of-state, presumably deep-pocket defendants that can be fleeced of their money. But increasingly, as we see out in California with abuse of Americans with Disabilities Act lawsuits, mom-and-pop shops can get swept up in these judicial hellholes too, and face very adverse consequences. So, it would take a while, and I'm game if you're game, but I'd have to kind of backtrack into much of what we very broadly call tort reform, but there are a variety of means by which judges and plaintiffs' lawyers can disadvantage the defendants, and of course, similarly, conversely, I should say, there are any number of legislative remedies and, for that matter, judicial reform remedies that don't necessarily have to go through lawmakers and a governor to make the civil court jurisdictions more fair, which is our ultimate goal.
We can probably address tort reform in a little bit. Let's get to the MBTE thing. I know that most of New Hampshire probably only heard in the news that Christmas came and we got a couple $100 million, but they probably don't know the dirty details in the backgrounds. And since this is really the case that kind of pushed us on the watch list, why don't you give us a little background on that?
Sure. MTBE is short for methyl tertiary butyl ether, and it is a gasoline additive that the federal EPA and state authorities began back in the 1980s to require as an additive in gasoline for good reason, because it reduces tailpipe emissions that deplete ozone layers and otherwise pollute our atmosphere. So, well-intentioned MTB additives became mandatory, and what this lawsuit filed by the state of New Hampshire, not using, I should note, and this may be crucial in our discussion later, but certainly what got our attention in writing our Judicial Hellholes report, rather than using staff attorneys at the Attorney General's office, the then Attorney General hired on a contingency fee basis private sector personal injury lawyers who were political allies and so forth, in the hopes, or in their hopes, in the attorney's hopes of scoring quite a big lucrative payday were they to win this lawsuit, which they ultimately did, at least at the trial level, and invariably this case is going to be appealed. But the essence of it was that rather than sue, and the lawsuit, I should say, alleged that any number of gas station storage tanks, and we've all been around, pulled into a gas station to fill up when the delivery truck is there, and they're filling up the underground storage tank with the gasoline that we'll all buy for the next couple of weeks before the next shipment. And the allegation was that any number of these storage tanks over time leaked, and MTBE contaminated the groundwater of various New Hampshire regions and so forth. And rather than sue the local gas station franchisee, whose ultimately is responsible for his or her own storage tanks, the state decided, no, they don't have enough money. We'll go after ExxonMobil because they've got deep pockets, and we can fleece them for far more than we could ever squeeze out of mom-and-pop gas station owners. So that's the essence of the lawsuit that we're about to talk about.
Okay, and you said they've appealed it, or they're going to appeal it?
Well, as I understand it, the last I knew, and this was days ago, Superior Court Judge Peter Favre was still considering what are known as post-trial motions. Exxon has raised, more than 24 issues, points of law and evidence that was disallowed during the trial and so forth. So the judge could conceivably do any number of things at any point during the next, few days or couple of months. He could conceivably dial back considerably the $236 million verdict that was rendered by the jury. He could do a lot of things. He could change the outlook on this case considerably. But assuming he's not prepared to do much of that, if any, by way of lessening the burden on ExxonMobil, ExxonMobil will all but invariably appeal this case within this, up the chain of appeals in the state. So that's almost a given, and so this case may not be over for some time.
This is Skip, and I want to say thanks for coming on the show as well. You said a couple things right from the get-go. One about the parasitic lawyers, and I was hoping to to get I have my own definition of parasitic, and I was hoping that you might be able to give us yours. But you also said that the local governments and the state governments made it into law that the refiners had to use MTBE in that. So, we're facing a couple of other issues here, but I've just noticed that oftentimes it is government who has done the original screw-up. Then they pass more laws to fix what they perceive to be a problem and never telling the public, oh, by the way, we made this bad in the first place. And then later on, several years or even a couple decades later, oh, look at this other problem that we have to fix right away, which, again, if you trace it back, goes back to government. Is this one of those cases where it really was government who created the problem via a mandate or regulation or what have you, and now they're just suing the poor, hapless people that are just obeying the law and created the gas with the additives that was demanded of them legally?
Well, the short answer would be yes, Skip, but for the irony that there really is no problem. That's the thing. If this MTBE groundwater contamination in the state of New Hampshire had led to any really measurable negative impact on environmental health or human health, that would be one thing. That would be a whole different story. If, in fact, there had been leakage that led to dying deer or leukemia in children someplace. But the fact of the matter is, and you don't have to take my word for it, all of the water authorities throughout the state of New Hampshire have and continue to insist that the drinking water is wholly safe. So it's not as though there has been any real injury. I mean, historically, lawsuits require demonstrable injury before they can go forth. I mean, if my water hose, if my garden hose, and you mentioned the weather at the top there, Steve, we're going to maybe hit 60 degrees here in Washington today, and all the snow that we've been buried under, not nearly as much as you guys have been buried under, has all but melted, and so that's good. So I'm going to get out and wash 3 inches of caked salt off my car here when we finish this conversation. But if I let my water hose, I forget it's running and it flows onto my neighbor's driveway, no harm, no foul. They say, hey, Darren, turn your hose off, will you? Yeah, I will. Okay, my hose contaminated their driveway. It ran onto their driveway. But there's no harm involved, and that's essentially what we have here in New Hampshire with the so-called contamination of MTBE into the groundwater. There has been no demonstrable negative impact on wildlife, on plant life, on human life or health, and that they're bringing this lawsuit essentially as a money-making opportunity. And you noted the fact that any number of the legislators are scrambling to spend this money on any number of things that have absolutely nothing to do with cleaning up the supposedly contaminated groundwater. They want to spend it on everything they can think of, and any time a politician can spend money on his or her constituents without having to raise his constituents' taxes, that's a boon. I mean, that's paradise for politicians. And look, if the money grew on trees and you could seek your paradise in a without having to take it from out of someone else's pocket. And look, I understand that ExxonMobil isn't exactly, the most sympathetic actor in American politics, but just because they're a giant corporation with billions of dollars doesn't mean it ought to be legal and right for them to be mugged in a New Hampshire courtroom, which is essentially what has happened here.
Okay, Darren, we're going to take a 60-second break, and then we're going to come back, and we have another co-host here who's joined us who's going to ask you a question. Just hang on a second. We'll be right back.
Steve McDonald here. You ever notice how Democrats like to create problems so they can then claim to solve them? Take Medicaid expansion, for example. Even if the federal government keeps its promise to New Hampshire to pay for most of it, it'll still cost New Hampshire taxpayers tens of millions of dollars more to provide inferior care and coverage to people who, for the most part, would never have needed it if Democrats hadn't reformed health care in the first place. That's right, that real expensive reform that doesn't care if it's only affordable if you act like you don't need insurance. Well, its number one claim to fame at this point is how many more people it forced onto Medicaid. And that's only because Obamacare kicks tens of millions of people off the plan they liked and were told they could keep but couldn't. So Medicaid expansion was always part of Obamacare for a reason. Democrats knew all along that the Affordable Care Act was unaffordable and they'd need to make Medicaid bigger and more expensive. So when people got their plan kicked to the health care curb, they could still sign up for something, even if it was something as crappy as Medicaid. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Talk.
All right, we're back. Darren Ed Nails joined us. He's the chairman of the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. He actually allows us to use the space from which we broadcast, and he has a lot of experience in this area, and he'd like to pose a question.
By all means, Ed, go ahead.
Oh, well, I have helped some people out on the receiving end of accusations of polluting aquifers with MTBE, and I was left with thousands of dollars in expenses and water testing and suits and things. Several junkyards in my town when I was a selectman, people always want to shut a junkyard down. It's like a badge of honor, and they were going to use the MTBE issue to do that to a guy in West Deering, New Hampshire. That's his junkyard's located over an aquifer, and they drilled and they drilled and they drilled and they drilled. They couldn't find anything. And the closer they got to the junkyard, they got to his property line, and they weren't allowed to drill anymore. They had to get permission to get on his property. Basically have someone say that it was polluted. And it turns out that when the gentleman came to drill closer to Mr. Green's property, they smelled the owner of the complainant. One of the many complainants drive by in his truck, and they could smell gas. And they went over to his garage, and a dirt floor garage, and his truck was leaking gas. So the MTBE measurement was like 128 parts per billion around that guy's home. And the closer you got to the junkyard, the less there was, until you went through the junkyard and across maybe another half mile, quarter of a mile, something like that, to his trailer park. And then it started to pick up to be 3, 5, 7, 9, something like that. But he had thousands of dollars in legal fees and water testing. I think they still monitor his property. It's a witch hunt, from what I've seen of it. You take a good look at it. It's a witch hunt. It costs a lot of people money, but it's a moneymaker for those involved in the phony cleanup of it.
It's true, and I suppose my boss might cringe when he hears me say this, but because it's far afield from where we focus our efforts. But whether it's MTBE in this instance, and Ed, the horror story you outlined there for us is typical, or the federal government's well-intentioned efforts to increase the availability of home loans to less than rich folks that had been ongoing for a couple of decades, and then all of a sudden, when some poor people who got housing loans can't pay them back, now it's the big bad greedy bankers who are of course threatened by federal prosecution and civil fines if they didn't extend these loans for a couple of decades. But now, oh no, government had none. It's not the government's doing that businesses are being bankrupted or this junkyard guy is being hounded and forced to squeeze out of thousands of dollars that he would rather have kept in his bank account, I imagine, than having to pay geologists and aquifer specialists to come in and drill holes, but to say nothing of fighting off, to hiring lawyer and so forth and consultants. But, this kind of thing is, look, and it'd be really nice if governments, if a neighborhood association or somebody decided to drive this MTBE lawsuit, that would be one thing. We could still fall back on all the scientific realities we've noted here, namely that there isn't any threat. There isn't any chemical threat to the environment or to human safety. We could still mention that. But at least if it was a private group alleging to have been harmed in one way or another, that would be one thing. But when you have the government who, which in this case, in good faith, look, and we all make mistakes. I can think doing X today is good, and then I can learn something tomorrow and realize that doing X wasn't good. But if I had character and integrity, I would say to those to whom doing X may have had an impact, I'd say, hey, my bad. Let's work together and get this thing sorted out and get it taken care of. I'm happy to take responsibility, but I'm not going to sue you or threaten some criminal prosecution because I'm carrying at least half the bag in terms of blame for this thing. So it'd be nice if the authorities in New Hampshire if in fact they could have demonstrated a legitimate problem as a result of this minor leakage of MTB from gasoline station storage tanks, if there was in fact a problem, that they could have taken a different approach in trying to solve the problem, as opposed to try to squeeze free money, out of some out-of-state deep pocket corporation.
I have to chuckle a little bit. Really, expecting that politicians are going to take responsibility for their decisions? I'm surprised.
I didn't say I expected that. I just said, wouldn't it be something? Wouldn't it be novel?
And in most cases here in New Hampshire, and I think everywhere else, most of us would be surprised if a politician did stand up and go, my bad. I do have a different question, just to put this in context, because you've been talking about the MTBE as being your primary example of why New Hampshire is becoming a judicial hellhole. Is this the only case that has put us into your favored unspeakables, or is it the general climate here in New Hampshire in the judiciary that is added to that in some small or not small measure?
I'm glad you asked that question because, folks who aren't familiar with our annual report, I'll spell it out here a little bit, but by all means, go to judicialhellholes.org. You can read every report we've published from 2002 onward, each annual report. We've also, as of 2010, become kind of a 24/7, 365 blog. So, you can read everything we've ever written about any jurisdiction on that website. But the watch list, to be differentiated from the actual ranking of several judicial hellholes themselves, full-blown judicial hellholes, that's one thing. And almost never does a single case merit a judicial hellholes citation. But I want to stipulate that by and large, my organization and its members do not consider New Hampshire to be a hugely problematic jurisdiction. But this one case was so shocking, so alarming, so one-sided, so uneven-handed that we thought we should flag it as a warning, as a good red flag and warning for policymakers there and judges that you don't want to make this your model, folks. If you want to continue to have a reputation that is even-handed, in which businesses can survive and thrive and create jobs and wealth and tax revenues, this is the kind of case you want to prevent from going forward in the future. So that's why we flagged this particular case. But by and large, we do not. Not to say we won't change our mind, and not to say that our position won't evolve as things on the ground there in the courthouses in New Hampshire evolve. But as of this moment, we do not consider New Hampshire a judicial hellhole. But this one case was so alarming and so troubling that we thought we should flag it in hopes of heading off real problems in the future.
We've got about 2 minutes. Why don't you give us some contact information and where people can go check out all the stuff other than the Hellholes report, because I know you have another website for the ATRA.
Our main website, the American Tort Reform Association's main website, is atra.org. That's ATRA.org, and you can visit that and see all our news releases, all our white papers, our documents. You can see the issues that we're tracking. We keep what may be handy to some of your listeners. They can click on a map. You can click on issues. You'll see a map. You can click on any state, find out the histories of what have been going on in every individual state with respect to tort reform advances, whether those be in state houses, legislation, or whether it be judicial reforms. A judge, kind of a hero of ours now in Philadelphia, 2 years ago, in February of 2012, undertook some reforms of his own, imposing protocol reforms on troubled judges that answered to him after we had flagged Philadelphia 2 years in a row as the nation's #1 hellhole. Very positive changes there. But, folks can see for themselves what's going on in the various states. That's atra.org. I mentioned our micro website, judicialhellholes.org. That's another interesting place. You can read about New Hampshire and neighboring states and so forth and see what's going on. But we welcome the interest and happy to be with you guys anytime you'd invite us back.
Now, do you also have your people like email you about cases that they think might qualify for your attention?
In fact, there's a spot on the Judicial Hellholes website. It's called Tell on a Hellhole. And anybody there, anonymously, unless, of course, you want to add your name, in which case that's fine, too. We're not going to rat you out to any authority. But we are very happy to take tips from the public as to what's going on. Bear in mind, and a number of the tips, unfortunately, are often about family court issues, divorces and child custody, or even criminal court issues. That is not our bailiwick. We're into lawsuits, tort lawsuits. That's our strength. So, but if you know of personally, are being impacted personally by a unholy alliance between some trial lawyers and a judge who may take political campaign contributions or otherwise be friendly with those trial lawyers, and you are getting screwed in a particular case, let us know, and then we'll in turn reach out to guys like you and other media outlets and try to shine a hot spotlight on it, because it's amazing when we do, as they say, sunlight's the best disinfectant.
I'm going to have to break in, Darren, because we're running out of time. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll be in touch again to get you back. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right, that was Darren McKinney, and we'll be right back.
Talk. Steve McDonald here. You ever notice how Democrats like to create problems so they can then claim to solve them? Take Medicaid expansion, for example. Even if the federal government keeps its promise to New Hampshire to pay for most of it, it'll still cost New Hampshire taxpayers tens of millions of dollars more to provide inferior care and coverage to people who, for the most part, would never have needed it if Democrats hadn't reformed health care in the first place. That's right, that real expensive reform that doesn't care if it's only affordable if you act like you don't need insurance. Well, its #1 claim to fame at this point is how many more people it forced onto Medicaid. And that's only because Obamacare kicks tens of millions of people off the plan they liked and were told they could keep but couldn't. So Medicaid expansion was always part of Obamacare for a reason. Democrats knew all along that the Affordable Care Act was unaffordable and they'd need to make Medicaid bigger and more expensive, so when people got their plan kicked to the health care curb, they could still sign up for something, even if it was something as crappy as Medicaid. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. The Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Rock Talk.
You're listening to Grok Talk. Little Stevie Ray Vaughan, Texas flood. Had a little flood yesterday driving to work in the morning. The snow is melting and it's puddling up in the roads. And of course, if you've never been here, we have lots of curvy, windy, little hilly roads. And when you have snow 5-6 feet high packed up on the sides of the roads and it starts to melt, it creates these little lakes that you get to drive through. And that's the best part, driving through the lakes.
Well, they call it ponding on the roads.
Ponding on the roads.
Yes.
Yesterday we had a dog. We have a dog, 2 dogs. And one dog is about that high, Riley.
Yep.
Riley fell off the deck and into the snow and had to walk all the way around the house in that snow that's like this deep, you know.
So you see this kind of deal,
Yeah,
huh?
I asked my wife, I said, what kind of animal walked around the house, came out of the woods and walked out around the house? She goes, that was Riley. He fell off the porch and didn't know where else to go and went around the way she would go in the summertime.
Yep, that's
poor devil.
It fit my dog to a T. Kaya, a little small, 22-pound Manchester Terrier, and she jumped out and went, "Oh crap! This is up over my shoulder." Your nose up in the air, saying, "I can breathe, I can breathe."
I have big dogs, and I snow blow a path out to the woods so they can get out there to go. But they start venturing off, and it's like, they're stuck. Their legs, they're like, oh. All right.
Climb snowbanks.
Well, we're not here to talk about dogs and snow. We're here to talk about vote fraud.
Oh, that kind of dogs,
Dogs. We're dogging the vote fraud.
But the Democrats are always trying to snow us about voter fraud. Here we go. Let's milk this one for all we can.
I'm going to let you guys get started. I got to exit the room for a second, but I'll be right back. Please proceed.
All right. I have given you guys a copy of something I made up yesterday. We all remember Alana Biden, don't we?
Oh, yes.
Alana Biden.
Vice President Joe Biden's niece.
One of the saner ones, apparently, but she was here in 2010. Joe Biden, yeah.
One of the saner ones?
Saner nieces.
Oh, the niece.
One of them was just
I was going to say,
almost incarcerated. Hey, she had some control issues. So we have here Alana Biden voted from 145 Steinmetz Drive in Manchester, which I call a voter nest. So she was working, Alana was, at 228 Elm Street, I think. That's where the office for Barack Obama was in Manchester in 2012.
Right.
And I believe Alana Jacquet, J-A-Q, or Jacquet, Biden was working in that office with a bunch of other people, maybe 6 or 7 other people. And apparently she was staying with the Kalick family, Alan M., Daniel J., and Patricia G. on 145 Steinmetz Drive. But there was another name of an associated voter there, and it is Alexandra Isabel Perez Caballero.
Cool.
Yeah, and Alexandra Isabel Perez Caballero was staying at 145 Steinmetz Drive, and she voted by absentee ballot.
Wow.
Now, why would she be doing that?
I'm looking at this data support specialist, Obama for America.
Well,
here's a number that I never knew. Nonprofit, 1,001 to 5,000 employees.
From
5,000 employees.
Yeah, you'll see that consistently. And well, we're catching them here in New Hampshire. But if you look at that, Alexandra Perez Caballero was a data support specialist for Obama for America in 2012. So that means she came here for 2 months to work for President Barack Obama's reelection. She stayed at 145 Steinman's Drive, but she is actually a resident of, let's see, I got her real residence from her voter registration in South Carolina. She actually lives at 3 Pinecroft Court in Columbia, South Carolina, 29229. And she lives there with her, apparently it's her mother. Her mother's name is, well, I don't have it on mine, but her mother's owned that property. I looked it up on the property ownership records on the internet, and she's owned that house since 2001. So yeah. I imagine that...
Nalita Caballero.
Yeah, Nalita. It's on your newer ones I printed out this morning. So Alexandra Perez Caballero voted from the home of the Kalick home along with Elena Biden. She is listed as a Obama worker, and she's a data support specialist. And if you were to look up her LinkedIn page, you would find she's a busy girl. She fits the profile of an Obama supporter. Let me see. Get this out here. Now, all of a sudden, my thumbs are dry. She went to the University of Chicago, surprise, surprise, from 2006 to 2009, and she studied, political science, of all things.
Oh, imagine that.
Surprise!
Well, then she gets out of college, and she speaks some Spanish. Surprise, surprise. She volunteered as a poll watcher for John Meadows for solicitor. It's a political position from May of 2010 to June of 2010. And then she went on to the community neighborhood team leader volunteer for the South Carolina Democrat Party. That was from September 2010 till October 2010. She was there for 2 months. She was a field organizer in South Carolina for the Democrat Party. Then she was a lead sales associate for Payless Shoe Source. And then she was a data support specialist for Obama for America in Manchester, New Hampshire. It says right here, October 2012 to November. So for 2 months, she was here in New Hampshire, and I guess she considers herself a resident or domiciled here, so she's allowed to vote. But she's still on the voter checklist. If you guys look on your front page, that's a copy of the state checklist. Okay, so these are all currently people that are registered to vote in the state of New Hampshire from 145 Steinmetz Drive. So unless Elena Biden has removed her name, she's still able to vote here. And she's a voter, I believe, in D.C., some other state. And
Elena's working for a public school in New York City.
New York City, that's right. So she would be registered in New York City and able to vote there and still able to vote absentee here, like Alexandra Isabel Caballero did.
Now,
how could
she voted absentee in New Hampshire in 2012?
Yeah, when she was working here.
Right.
So you didn't have a chance to hang around till November 6th?
Kind of like our buddy from Arkansas.
Same deal. So this is why it's important when you have clean voter lists, because someone can be registered. We know people have been registered in 3 or 4 states, and they can pick and choose. As a citizen of New Hampshire who votes legally here, I have one choice. If there's a U.S. Senate seat up, I have one choice. I can't say, you know what, I'll just send my ballot to Virginia. I'd rather help out a friend of mine or somebody I like in Virginia, or I'll send a ballot to Michigan, or I'll vote in any of 3 states that I'm registered in, currently legally registered in. Well, how does the Constitution allow for some people to have special rights to vote? They have an option of voting for 2, maybe 3 people.
It must be that second Bill of Rights by FDR.
And there's nothing in the state of New Hampshire. There's no loophole. I've been looking for the loophole that allows people from out of state to vote here. And I hear it over and over again. There's a loophole that allows people to vote here, come in, vote here, and say, oh, I changed my mind. I live somewhere else. Alexandra didn't change her mind, and Elena Biden didn't change her mind. They came here with one thing in mind, that's getting Barack Obama elected. They both worked for Organizing for America. They both moved in with these people that provided them a place to stay for that purpose. This isn't a rental property. It's a single-family home. And stole our votes and took off for parts unknown.
Well, you know where the loophole is.
I wish loopholes in the Attorney General's office.
Bingo.
The hole is between 2 ears. Apparently,
you know what?
Well, it's beyond more than just one pair of ears.
This just occurred to me, and I think I may have made this point in the past, but I don't remember. The Democrats like to talk about us saying that these people can't vote here as like vote suppression, but how can you have vote suppression against somebody who can vote in 3 or 4 different states?
That suppresses the votes that live in those states.
That's true voter suppression.
That's real, absolute. I can name you anybody, pick a name of a person who legally votes in New Hampshire, their vote was suppressed by these two people.
Well, they were, but
That's
I'm
a
just saying, you know how
fact.
the Democrats like to talk about how it's vote suppression, but yet you have people like Caitlin Legacki, who was registered in at least 3 or 4 states. Her vote wasn't suppressed if we didn't let her vote here. She could have voted in Missouri. She could have voted in North Carolina. She could have voted. I mean, she voted in Missouri, and somebody else voted for her here. But just as an example, we have all of these people who come here, and they're all registered to vote in another state.
Right.
And
our state doesn't clean up our voter checklist. So they willingly are helping these people suppress our votes. That's real voter suppression that I can put a name to. I've read in the Seacoast Online and Portsmouth Herald, there's a couple of guys out that way. One's David A. Potter, and I forget the other guy's name, but they're writing about the thousands of people who are disenfranchised by the new photo ID laws. So you have to ask these people, name one. If you know of thousands of people who are, they keep saying, qualified voters are disenfranchised by photo ID laws, or legal voters are disenfranchised. Well, and thousands of them all over the country in the state of New Hampshire. In the state of New Hampshire on November 6, 2012, 718,000 people voted in New Hampshire. 99,000 of those people registered on the same day. So we have no idea who they were till they walked in and provided identification. 14,000 of them didn't. So who was suppressed? We had 14,000 people walk into a polling place on Election Day with no photo ID, no driver's license, no nothing, and vote. How were they suppressed? They were actually encouraged to take someone else's vote, because we still don't know. Thousands of those people are being investigated by the
There's like
Attorney
4,000 or
General.
5,000. They don't know.
Yeah. So,
or is it up to 7,000? They don't have any idea who they are.
I wouldn't believe any figures coming out of the office right now. I know how often I can't find people, so I'm having a little trouble believing they're going to find everybody.
Well, see, they play by different rules. We tend to be, quote unquote, the real reality-based community because we know this inside information. We stay on top of it, especially with your auspices here, tracking down these numbers. 99,000 first day, 14,000 without photo ID. The normal voter in the state would have no idea what those numbers meant, even if you told them. You'd have to tell them several times, put it into context several different times. So it finally became ingrained. So people who claim that people are being disenfranchised can say it all the time that they want, and it's the big lie all over again. Say it enough times, people will believe you because they know. They depend on the low information voter not paying attention to stuff like this to know what the truth is. I mean, even the Attorney General knows this. Secretary of State
Bill
knows
Gardner
this.
knows.
All of these
Judge
people
Lewis
know that, and it appeared in the papers briefly, and that's the word to hang on, briefly. In it comes, out it goes, there it went. And it's only because of people like you, Ed, who follow this, and some of us on the right, the bloggers, and Steve, you've been certainly a big part of this. Talk radio with especially Rich Gerard at large, and others as well.
I have to say, some of the Republican Party leadership that put together workshops for me to attend, they're packed. I mean, just tons of people show up at those things. I got one coming up March 7th, I think, in New Boston.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Republican leadership.
Not the top leadership always,
That's
but
what
the
I
people
was going
who,
to talk about.
like the town committees.
The committee, the committee chairman.
The committee
city
chairman, I'll tell you, boy, they're very, come on in, and they get me crowds, and they're very attentive. They wait till the end to ask questions, and I send them copies of stuff. It's really encouraging to show up at one of these things and see the standing room only in the back. So.
Yeah, once again, we see something that's very important to the base. And the town chairs understand that, and they're inviting you in. But I'm talking about at the very top. Do you hear from the NHGOP e-board? Do you hear from the NHGOP chair saying, hey, we need to do something about this? Because I believe that they don't, because they're trying to protect people.
I'm never sought out to say, hey, show me what you got.
Yeah.
And
this should be a perfect thing. I mean, we've been putting this stuff out now for months, and you would think that
I've been doing it for years.
Well, right, but our involvement here at Granite Rock has been on the month kind of level.
Yep.
Here we've got a perfectly great club, because we started talking about that in the beginning of the show, to give to the NHGOP to say, by the way, take this and club them with this. And here's the proof's there. You've already done the hard work.
But it's everywhere. If I call the Republican Party in Missouri
Yeah.
for some help with Caitlin Legaki,
Yeah.
I won't get a call back. Virginia, well, you don't understand how hard it is. Florida's a tough one. Most of the states where you get help, it's from private groups, like Civitas in North Carolina, and individuals in other states are very helpful.
Yeah.
So like taxpayer groups, things like that. But Republican parties throughout the country, when you get to the top leadership and you say voter fraud, look, I have evidence of voter fraud, they just can't get out of the room fast enough.
I mean, look at what James O'Keefe with Project Veritas just released again against Battleground Texas, a very, very progressive organization.
They're communists. That's what they are.
Right, and that is that they are violating the law, demonstrably violating the law
Intentionally.
to turn Texas blue by doing what the law specifically prohibits them to do as far as data mining the information from the people they're supposedly signing up to vote. And they're going to stuff that into the Obama for America's data machine, and they're going to use it against the Republicans. And you look at this. Now, to their credit, it looks like some of the high elected GOP officials, like Greg Abbott, and some of those type folks are trying to get this rolling to basically disenfranchise Battleground Texas for doing illegal activities.
Well, I can point another.
But why aren't the Republicans looking at this and going, let's hammer these people?
It must come naturally because it seems to be everywhere. But
Cowards.
when you find that Battleground Texas has used a position that allows them to see private information of potential voters, you wonder, why didn't anybody stop that? Then you think, it's the same people, and like this one right here, this Alexander Perez Caballero. When you look at the hundreds of these that I've looked at, you see the pattern. They excel in high school, they get awards. Most of the time they get an opportunity to travel abroad at someone else's expense. They come back, they go to college, or about the same time they do the same thing. But it's almost uniform. They go out of the country for Peace Corps or something like that. They come back here, they get out of school for political science, and they go right to campaigning. And they really, other than stopping in a few locations, campaign after campaign after campaign. But let's just take this one I just found yesterday. Here is, she worked at Payless Shoes. And what was her job? Collected and entered customer information from dozens of transactions daily, trained new sales associates, but data collection. Every job they have is data collection. You're going to tell me that they go work for a nonprofit like Buy the Children in Belize Shoes, nonprofit. You're going to tell me they're not slipping a disc in and grabbing all the names and phone numbers to give to their friends of the Democrat Party, like the registration collectors were in Texas. They were collecting data they were not allowed to have. And what did they do with it? Right to the Democrat Party to build that giant database. The more you look at these people that work for Organizing for America, they're at the census.
Yep.
They're at nonprofits where they can get the list. They're at companies where they can get the list. I would never let any of these people near any of my business lists because they're going to tap those and take them home with them. If you're going to come to New Hampshire and work here for Obama and claim you live here and then steal my vote with your absentee vote from South Carolina, you think I'd trust you around my lists of my company? So when somebody's going to hire somebody, one of these characters out of for any nonprofit or a business, take a look and see if they work for Organizing for America and whether or not they're data collection or data mining experts, because that's what I see over and over and over again. Once you find out how they work, remember you said 5,000 employees. What do you think those 5,000 people are doing?
Well, almost
every
single one that you've passed by us, they are either a GIS specialist, graphical information system, mapping and applying data for visualization, or data collection, or another type programmer. I mean, you're exactly right. You look at the vast data hacks that have been going on in a lot of our big commercial retailers. Who knows whether or not these folks have been part of it, or they just haven't been caught yet.
They have the skills. They have no morals. They've stolen my vote here. Every single last one of them we brought up has stolen our votes in New Hampshire. I would never hire them or trust them to do anything. They are who they are. They are where they belong. And Barack Obama won't have $1 billion to run next time. He won't be running. So things are going to be a little leaner for them. They have to go out in the market and compete against real people for real jobs. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
We're going to take 60 seconds, and we'll be right back.
Steve McDonald here. Molly Shaheen, Senator Jean Shaheen's daughter, has a very expensive LA apartment where she lives and works, but for some strange reason, she voted here in New Hampshire. Alana Biden, niece to the man a heartbeat away from the presidency. Well, she never lived in New Hampshire at all, and she voted here and went back home. New Hampshire Democrat Emma Roos invited her adult children to leave their homes in Virginia, Washington, D.C. to claim they lived in New Hampshire to vote last November, and they went back home. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, vice chair of the New Hampshire Democrat State Party, she had a whole bunch of people who aren't from here living in her home, including a paid congressional staffer and an ACLU lawyer from Arkansas. They don't live here. They all claim to be claiming to live here just so they can vote here and then leave. That's not all the Democrats who showed up to steal your votes and then leave, but that'll get you started. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Raw Talk.
Okay, so we're going to continue our voter fraud discussion. Ed had me put up some content for him earlier in the week. I'm Ed's official content provider.
I can't do it.
He provides the content, and I put it up for him. But it's okay because he writes short, and I don't have a lot to look at.
I can't breathe.
He posted this video. Oh, go ahead. Just explain it.
Well, I've had this video. It's of Professor Julian Smith, retired professor from UNH. And on November 6th of 2012...
let me point out, Mr. Timothy Horrigan, listen carefully.
Oh, he's got to be listening, isn't he?
Oh, he may be.
He will. If he isn't listening live, he probably will listen to the podcast.
Yes.
Anyway,
this is for you.
He had someone take a video of him parading around on Election Day in Durham, New Hampshire, which is the home of UNH. I was there. I was parading around. People don't know what I look like unless they watch this show, but I don't go to a lot of functions. I don't have my picture in the paper and stuff. Most people don't know what I look like, so I go to these different places. I was at Hanover on November 6th. I was at UNH on November 6th. November of 2008, I followed the buses around. I collected trophies, Barack Obama's and Biden's faces on these stickers you put in the inside of a car and they stick to the window so that they would know that you were a home, let's say a soccer mom shuttle bus. So he had this video taken, and the idiot was out in front asking students, "Oh, you're from Durham?" "Yes, I am." "Do you know where the town hall is?" "Oh, no." "Oh, that could be a problem." He's trying to gloat, sort of the fact that, look at the 3,000 students were registered same day. 3,000. Well, there's 15,000 people live in Durham. There's 12,800 students. Half of those students or more pay out-of-state tuition. They are not residents of the state of New Hampshire. They will have to claim residency. And I'm going to hold them to that because when I catch them on arrest records after they voted, which is now, if I catch them on the arrest records as giving the New Jersey driver's license or whatever, I'm going to go back and match it because I have the voter registration from that same day deal. So I'm going to put their name on the internet, and when they do the little social media thing and pull up their name, it's going to see low-life scumbag vote thief. And their mommy and daddy can hire an attorney and try and stop me from doing that if they'd like. But this guy was highly entertaining. He went out and he's got the denim, the corduroy pants and the beard and the wire glasses like a professor would. And he's walking up and down all these students, tickled to death that they've come out to vote for Obama, but really not knowing what he should say or do, or apparently what's legal. Because he said, "I hope we're all out here for the right reason." If I said that at a polling station, gone. They'd have me hauled out of there by the AG's office. I'm not supposed to really talk to these individuals. As a poll watcher, they're not supposed to talk to me. But, I walked around. I get a sense of what's going on. I'm checking the lines and seeing who's outside and doing what. But I posted that on Granite Rock, and it got some response from somebody who's going by the name Hannah. Well, Mr. Smith is associated with Hannah's blog. It's a family member. If you go on and you look at the videos, you'll find Julian Smith in the videos, and I imagine that's who took the video of him parading up and down the group of college students registering to vote same day. And then we had this other. My wife's a flight attendant, and there's people that hang around where they put the food together on a plane. The girls call them galley flies. All right, these guys, get their drink and decide that they'll have their drink up where the girls are putting the food together on the trays. Galley flies. Well, your blog has this galley fly that likes to write, and that galley fly was actually on the ballot on November 6th. So he is rewarded handsomely by 3,000 students coming out to vote and checking his name off because he has, there's a Republican Moonbat. Well, he's a Moonbat, so that's the name they would check off. So here he is, champion of the students, champion of open voting. Why not give your seat to a student? Obviously, there's way more student voters in the town of Durham, and there's a lot more on the voter checklist in Durham than there are galley flies who live in their mother's basement. Okay, so I think it's time that they had some young people represented in these lower ballots names like Horrigan or something like. You see a name like that, you just don't vote for it. You get a college student to run for that spot in a primary,
An out-of-state college student.
An out-of-state college student would be. Well, we've had that happen
We
before.
have. That's why I said it.
We actually have a state rep who we think lives in Worcester, Mass, who called me the other day to have some work done, and I'd seen him. I had seen him earlier that day in the legislature.
He doesn't happen to be a Democrat, does he?
I was upstairs in the
Just curious.
I was upstairs in the galley, and there he is. And then he calls me later on the day, to go to his house and do some work. And I said, well, just mark the trees, take some trees down. He goes, well, I don't know how long it'll take me to get there. When I'm going to be up again. Well, you were there this afternoon. Because I saw you. I didn't tell him that, but I saw him in the legislature. Now he's back down in Worcester. I think he divides his time, but we've had out-of-state people get elected to the House, and I don't know about the Senate, but I know we've had Massachusetts residents who get elected to the House. Stephanie C. Sinclair comes to mind. But I think that we should have some, and the treasurer in Hanover.
Yeah.
The county treasurer,
yes.
I don't even remember her name anymore, but we should
$40 Facebook ad.
We should find somebody who really represents the town of Durham, like a student, to run for some of these lower seats and be a state rep. Put that on their resume instead of just vote thief. They could put vote thief and New Hampshire state representative for 2 years. That would be golden. But the galley flies are out now. You start watching the Seacoast Online, Portsmouth Herald, you'll start to see the pro voter fraud editorial. So April, May, it's going to start getting ugly. These Obama people will be back here. As I look at their LinkedIn pages, and you've seen it, Steve, they start showing up here in April and May for campaigns. So we're going to start seeing these people put together the letters to the editors for other people in New Hampshire to sign. So we'll be tracking those and exposing who those people are. It's been highly entertaining, and I want everybody to meet Alexandra Isabel Parros Caballero. Your name will be up on the Internet shortly, and show it to all your friends.
All right. Thank you very much for spending some time with us to give us this update. My name is Steve McDonald. I am here with Skip Murphy. This is Grok Talk. We'll be right back with Warren Ray, the author of Shadow Patriots, in just a couple of minutes.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
The Center for Redress of Grievances, LLC, was established officially November of 2012 for the purpose of becoming a media outlet for those individuals who believe and have documentation that they've been unjustly treated by local, state, or federal government agencies. Our mission is to document their stories and to get them out to the public. By collecting and organizing this data, the Center for Redress will be able to better show the public and our legislature that there are issues with some of our government agencies that may be widespread and need to be addressed. Although we are not a nonprofit, we do provide all of our services at no cost to our clients. All of our services may include screening interviews, documentation gathering, audio-video of court hearings, and production of Speak Up, which is our television show. We're funded exclusively through sponsorship of Speak Up and our advertisers on our website. We hope to help those individuals who, with well-documented stories, need to be heard with credibility when the other agencies and media sources turn a deaf ear to them. You can go to our website at www.centerforredress.com and check us out. Anything you would like to donate is truly appreciated, and we will put it to good use.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to Grok Talk.
Grok Talk.
Welcome back to Grok Talk. I'd like to thank our previous guest, Darren McKinney, from the, I got to lean over and look,
American Tort Reform.
American Tort Reform Association, and then, of course, Ed Nail, chairman of the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Check it out at cnht.org and see where he will be speaking next about vote fraud. It's a pretty popular topic around here because we got a lot of it. But we're going to change directions a little bit. We haven't had an author on in a little while, so it's kind of nice to take a break and talk to somebody who's out there writing. Warren Ray, who lives out in Illinois but is originally from New Hampshire, has written a book that you can get online for the stellar price of 99 cents. You can download it to your Kindle or your Nook. It's called Shadow Patriots. It basically is a post-economic apocalypse novel. And Warren, would like to welcome you to the program. How you doing?
I'm very well. How about yourself, Steve?
Doing great, thanks. How's the weather out there in Illinois?
It's livable. Trudging through the winter, as I'm sure you guys are as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're having a break right now. It's going to be in the 40s and 50s for the next day or two, but then it's going to get cold again, and we'll go back to some more snow. So that's kind of how it is.
Pretty much what we get, you get.
Yeah,
like.
well, yeah, you get that cold air from Canada though, because it just settles right down in there, and ooh, and you get the lake there and everything. And I mean, I know it's, if you're in central Illinois, it's far enough away, but it still has an effect. I grew up outside of Rochester, New York, and we used to have lake effect snow. We would get bands of squalls, and you would have like 4 feet of snow and then no snow, and then 4 feet of snow and then no snow, and you could come away from the coast and you would get these squall bands that would just form and dump snow and then stop and then dump snow, and you could live 20 miles away from the lake, and somebody 10 miles closer and you got nothing, and you got snowed in big time. It's awesome what lakes can do to your weather. So, you wrote this last year, Shadow Patriots. Why don't you give us tell us a little bit about your book?
Well, basically, it's about the downfall of America. It's what could happen in this country if things don't turn around. And the background of the book is, our economy has completely collapsed, and China takes advantage of our situation and attacks us on the West Coast in California. And it's a war that we're losing, and we're losing men and women big time. And they're desperate for volunteers to come in and help fight the war, and they're even letting people who are middle-aged in their 50s even join. And so the story follows my main character, Cole Winters. He's 52 years old, and he volunteers to help fight in the war. And he goes to this recruiting station, and he stumbles upon this plot that's killing the volunteers before they even get out into the war. And so it follows him along this journey, and he's just trying to, evade capture and survive and find out who's doing this and stop it from happening anymore. So he relies on other recruits to help him in this endeavor.
Wow, this is Skip Murphy, and I want to say thanks for coming on the show. This sounds like a combination of The Postman meets Red Dawn meets National Geographic's Doomsday Preppers.
Well, in a way, it can. I don't know. Some people have described it as a post-apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it, story. But I mean, it's kind of at the very beginning. I mean, bad things have happened in the country, but it's kind of pre that, and it could definitely lead to that if things don't, turn around. So it's definitely a cautionary tale as to what could happen.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've hit a sweet spot because we are political and cultural bloggers, more on the political than the cultural side. And I will tell you that I have seen a shift on the last couple of years where people, and I remember when I first started to see it about a year and a half ago, where people who I would never expected to hear this kind of talk saying, I think I need to buy a generator. Maybe I need to buy a little bit of extra food that I can put away. And I need to be able to defend myself. Now, here in New Hampshire, you do have to be ready. We can have these ice storms that can take out the power system for a couple of weeks, and that has all kinds of ramifications. So most of us tend to prepare or prep is the current word for that, but a lot of other people are prepping for other types of things, including the economic collapse. But I have noticed a lot of people, especially on the writers, are looking at this with more than just, okay, this is no longer tinfoil hat territory. And
right, exactly.
In doing some of your research for this, did you get a chance to talk to some folks like this?
I didn't, and I got to be honest with you. I had no idea. I knew the prepping was a trend, but those thoughts really never entered my mind because I started this 3 years ago, and those thoughts really never entered my mind. And it wasn't until after I wrote the book that I was doing some marketing, and that's when I found out that the prepper it's a big trend. I mean, there's hundreds of websites out there on prepping. And so I find it fairly interesting that more people are prepping, and it is a good thing to prep because you never know what could happen. You're right. If something happens, food's gone, and you need a generator for heat and whatnot. And some people take it to an extreme, which is probably a good thing. We should always be prepared. And but I don't know if it will come to that. I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist, and I think things can turn around. You see. The Tea Party movement, rising up more and more now. And, we got great dissenters out there are fighting the cause. And so I do believe that things can turn around and that we don't need to go down this road that we're going down.
It's always a choice. And we make our choices as a society through the ballot box. But, I'm watching the last couple of weeks with the news coming out of Venezuela and especially what we've seen. And I'll be honest with you, a couple nights ago, ABC News, or was it last night, showed the street violence, the almost military-style street violence coming out of the Ukraine. And for the first time in my life that I can remember, ABC, a national network, is actually showing the results of sniper fire on human beings being killed on national TV in prime time, the 6 o'clock news hour or 6:30 hour. And I'm going, these people made choices as well. And look what's happening there. And I'll go a little bit into the tinfoil hat area here. There's a lot of conspiracy going on. And unfortunately, among the right, the far right, or maybe the prepper community, we've seen so much being done by this administration that we've never seen done by other administrations of, ruling by executive fiat. We see the FCC trying to move into areas that it's not supposed to be, where the latest news was they were going to send observers into the newsrooms of TV, radio, and newspapers. We see, other agencies trying to, basically kill off the coal industry. Is that a function of our Democrat limited government history? And it's to the point where more than a few bloggers are saying, I never used to believe in conspiracy theories, but almost every single one of the older ones is starting to come true with overreach by government. With the NSA spying, the DEA, the FBI. It's like, what the heck? So now that you've done the book and now you're doing sort of some of the research, are you hearing that from other people? And how would that tie back into your book?
Well, it's interesting because, you're right. This thing in Ukraine is in a way, it's kind of fascinating to see. And also down in Venezuela, that people are rising up. You don't hear much about the Venezuela story as much as you do with the Ukraine thing. And it is interesting to see that, people just everybody wants to be free. And, we should have known that this was going to happen because, Obama was, when, a few years ago when Iran started protesting and he did nothing about it and he had a chance to really help out the people of Iran, and he did nothing. And so we should have known then that this was the way he was going to act with all these types of things. And here we go with the Ukraine and Venezuela, and people are rising up. And the president, he just sits there silently. It makes you wonder what side of the aisle he would be on if he was would he be a protester or would he be for the government?
Well, in Ukraine, as an example, I just read a very fabulous post that I think I put up. I don't remember if I did. If I didn't, I will put a link up to it. A gentleman who gave an excellent analysis of the situation in the Ukraine. And the problem there was that the president, who is believed to be a puppet of Putin, was beginning to create a culture very much like Obama's, where he was passing these very dictatorial executive order type laws and being very restrictive. And the students came out and said, you've been beating on us for a while, excuse me, but we'd really like to consider something different. We're protesting against this overreach. We didn't give you this power. You're taking it. You're not entitled to it. Right. And then, of course, the military came out, the police came out, and they started causing some serious harm. So former Afghanistan vets, Russian, Ukrainian guys who served in Afghanistan, war with Russia, and they came out to protect the kids, not just because they were their kids or not, but because they were the next generation. And then that led to this other thing. And then you literally had millions of people coming out and saying, we didn't give you this authority. And this guy kind of backed off, then he moved forward and backed off and moved forward. And the problem is that they want the Ukraine to be a socialist Russia-like country, and these people have stepped up and said, no, we're against that. We're against your corruption. And you bring up government corruption in your book. It's a major driver in the story early on about how this all comes apart.
Well, and it's interesting because what's happening there is in Ukraine and Venezuela is that there was a tipping point. And at some point in this country, there will be a tipping point where we're going to just say absolutely not. And you could almost say the Tea Party movement is kind of like that because we're getting tired of the things that are going on. And so, the more Obama does these things, the more there'll be a boiling point. And when that happens, then we will rise up. And I don't necessarily think that we'll rise up protesting like what's happening in Ukraine and Venezuela because we do have freedom of speech and we do have opportunity to protest and have our voices heard, whereas in other countries, they don't necessarily have that. And so it does allow us to vent our anger and our frustration in different ways. And that's why I think that, I don't necessarily think that we would ever come to that point because, we rise up in different ways. And that's why I remain to be an optimist because I think that, I just think that.
Well, I agree with you because if you look at like the Wilson administration or if you look at what went on under Roosevelt, there were gangs roaming the streets representing the interests of the government, suppressing opposition physically, verbally. I mean, they were out and doing basically fascist things. And we recovered from that pretty much, more or less, in one form or another. So there is always hope. I always think about that. I think about, the organizations that Roosevelt created whose sole purpose was to oppress businesses who might disagree with his policies. They created a massive government bureaucracy whose whole function was to make sure that everybody agreed with whatever Roosevelt was doing, essentially. I mean, he was willing to pack the court. He was, and if you go back to Wilson, it was a war economy. It was your standard nationalist, fascist war economy. It was driven by a very structured, militarized social order that was defended and protected by people who were supporting the government. And we aren't there yet. I think the Tea Party does continue to apply pressure to the Republican Party. I think part of the tipping point that we're talking about has a lot to do with how Republicans respond. And right now they haven't been responding very well. You mentioned a couple who stand out. And as long as we continue to have some voice somewhere, even at the state level or the federal level, I think people will keep their powder dry. But if you get to a point where you can't find anybody, like in your story, you're looking for somebody to be president, and you get all the way down to like the Secretary of Labor or something, and it turns out he's corrupt too, or whoever he is. So now at that point, you're
Speaker of the House. Yeah.
Speaker of the House. You're like, now there's nobody. Where do we go from here?
Right. And in my book, there are certain conspiracies that made this happen. I don't delve into a lot of the conspiracies, but in the end of the book, there is a conspiracy that is exposed as to how the government is, behind this. And I do have a part 2 of the book, and that will expose an even bigger conspiracy as to how this all happened. And there are definitely conspiracies in there, and you're right, there are people in the government who work behind the scenes to make people do different things and pit one against the other. And that's it's definitely a way for I'm not quite sure how to explain it. It's definitely people out there who are conspiring against America. Let's put it that way.
Okay, Ray, we're going to take a 60-second break. Warren, sorry,
Sure.
we're going to take a 60-second break. We're right. Stay on the phone. We'll be back in just a minute.
Betcha.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Raw talk.
Okay, we are back with Warren Ray, author of Shadow Patriots. And Skip, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the end of the book, and I have to admit I have not yet read it. Steve was telling me about it during one of our previous breaks, so I'm probably going to go out and purchase it and pull it down on my wife's iPad and take a look at it.
Oh, by the way, I went and looked, and because Amazon has the bestseller link list,
Yes.
And Warren's book is kicking the ass of Nancy Pelosi and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So there you go.
Oh, that's cool.
That's kind of a low bar, Steve.
It is a low bar, I know, I'm sorry, but it was funny. I didn't have time to go look at other books that were like yours. But I just found it very amusing that, Pelosi's book, for example, has been out since 2008, and her ranking is like 436,000, and yours is like 50,000 or 40,000 or something like that. So anyway,
yeah,
I'm
the
like,
thing about that Amazon, that Amazon, it's a great thing for self-authors, self-published authors. And those rankings, they change daily. It's really quite an amazing thing. But yeah, it is kind of funny that her book, and what was that guy, that Obama's guy in Chicago, that professor who was the bomber there?
Yeah.
Bill Ayers.
Bill Ayers, yes. Well, I was listening to Rush a few weeks ago, and he was saying that his book only sold like 200 copies.
Wow.
And he had a major publisher. It was in the bookstores.
and those were just insiders. Probably, maybe he bought them.
Or he bought them.
And he gave them away. This is my vanity book. Anyway, I'm sorry. So Skip, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to forget my previous question. I'm going to go to this because I think it's rather interesting to see the democratization of publishing because of electronic books, electronic publishing, the ability to, for basically a single author like yourself, to kind of go around the major publishing houses and to be able to do this all on your own.
Well, it's a wonderful thing. You've got, it's all changing. Everything is changing. You can publish your own video and put it on YouTube. You can have your own podcast, have your own radio station. Everything is being is like that. And in the publishing world, you got people out there that are publishing their own books, and there's even major authors are now going around the big six publishing companies and publishing their own book. And they retain all the rights, and it's on the internet forever. As opposed to a bookstore, it's the average life of a book in a bookstore is 6 months. And it takes it can take a couple of years even to get published, and even then when you're a first-time author, they expect you to do all your own marketing and promotions anyways. The days of going on a book tour, those days are gone.
Do you have any?
It's a wonderful vehicle.
Do you have any advice for people who are considering this, seeing as you've gone through it?
Yeah, right. No, seriously. I mean, anybody can be a writer these days, and there's hundreds of thousands of self-published authors out there now, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and more and more people are going to Kindle writing. Having a Kindle, it's a great thing. You can download a book instantaneously and start reading it, and the books are reasonably priced. I mean, I've got mine on for 99 cents. It won't be 99 cents forever, but there's the average book sale. The average book costs about $4. And what a great thing that is. But yeah, self-published authors out there, if you want to write, absolutely write. And make sure you have a decent editor to find all your typos.
I could use one of those.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there's a lot of books out there that have a lot of typos, and because editors are expensive, and it's a process.
Yeah, well, being the leading conservative libertarian political blog site here in New Hampshire, we self-publish multiple times a day, depending on how the spirit moves and how fast the fingers can fly. So we understand that, except we just don't get paid for this stuff.
Right.
But my question is, have you been published by a publishing house before, so that you can contrast that process to what you've done self-publishing, and how do the economics work?
I have never been published before, and the economics. If you price your book at say $4, with Amazon they pay you 70%, which is you make like $3, and that's about what you would make with if you're a first-time author, or even some authors. That's pretty much what they get paid from the publishing companies, and and plus you get that money forever. Like I said, books are only out there for 6 months, so you don't have a whole lot of time to make that money. And so the economics does work out in the end. And if anybody wants a really good website to look at, there's a blog out there by Joe Conrath, The Newbie's Guide to Publishing, and he explains and he goes through everything, and he's a self-published author himself, and he's all for self-publishing. He thinks Barnes & Noble is going to go out of business within a year or two, which it probably will. The Borders went out of business. And so, eventually you're going to see the downfall of the big publishing houses. You'll still have some small publishing companies out there. It's kind of like newspapers. A lot of newspapers are going out of business or are really hurting right now. And it's definitely the wave of the future.
I lost my train of thought. Okay, anyway, so back to your book. Sorry. We're not out of time yet, but why don't
where to go to that?
Where to go get it? You talked about. I know it's available. You can download it for the Nook. You can download it for the Kindle. I know you have a website as well.
Well, I've got a Facebook page on my website. I've been kind of lazy about getting it up right now, but that is coming in the coming days.
So where can they find you? Are you under your name on Facebook?
You can. I got a Facebook page, the Shadow Patriots, a fan page on Facebook, and I'll go ahead and link this podcast to that.
Cool.
And absolutely, you can just get on Amazon and Google the Shadow Patriots. They'll pull it right up.
So, is there anything else you can tell us about your next book?
Oh yes, more people will die.
Oh, so it's like
optimistic.
It's like Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. There's I have a huge conspiracy that's going to come out in the second book, and it's going to surprise a lot of people, and it'll make people think that maybe so. Because I have there's things in the book that I came up with 3 years ago that have already happened in the first book. It's kind of scary. I'll be sitting there listening to Glenn Beck, and he'll talk about something, and I'll look at my daughter, and we look at it, and she's like, "That's in our book already." It's kind of an eerie thing.
And that goes back to what I said earlier. It's hard to not believe some of the things that come out because of what we've already seen in our recent history coming out of this administration. Stuff that you never think that would ever happen. You go, oh, crap.
Right. And I could not have written this book 10 years ago because it would have been unbelievable. No way. These things would never happen. But now people are waking up thinking, these things can happen because look what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Well, the economic pressure alone, I mean, once people come to grasp with the notion of a $17 trillion and growing debt, and, we were talking about Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire in a couple different segments earlier, and the Republicans are even on board to take $2.4 billion from where? Where the heck's the money coming from? It's coming from debt that we bought from China, which is part of your book, and it's like, and that money to pay for that debt, if we ever do pay for it, is going to come from us and our kids. So it's not free. We've been talking about these things and that kind of pressure. So as people come to grasp the notion that that number is so large that maybe there is a problem and we won't be able to pay it back.
Well, and that's the premise. That's kind of the premise of China attacking America. Is we owe them bukus of dollars, and they want their money back, and they're going to come and get it if they have to. And
I would give them California if they just asked.
Well, it's funny. I talked to some people about it, and they all say the same things. They can have it.
Yeah, I mean, California's got tons of debt. They can have it. They can have the oranges. They can have Hollywood. They can have the Valley. Take it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Warren, we're coming to the end of our segment. I want to thank you very much for coming on. We have each other's email. Let me know when your book's coming out, and we'll have you back on.
You betcha. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. You have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye now.
All right. That was Warren Ray, the author of Shadow Patriots. Always great to have people on who are like pretty much the rest of us and just doing something a little different. He's publishing, we're podcasting, and that's awesome.
Absolutely. And I was surprised with some of this podcast with him. It certainly is refreshing to hear from somebody outside of us that, you're right, thinks probably a lot of stuff that should never have happened has happened. And it's like, well, let's go a little bit further, a few steps out and go, well, where can we go from here? What could the future history actually be? Which is really what that kind of genre is. I used to be a big science fiction reader back in the day. And all it really was what's happening now and how can I basically do like Star Trek, cowboys in space, and see what the different future lines could be.
I know people are like, how could you even think that way? But the real question is, how could you think that way? How could you get to a point in your culture, politically, socially, where you would look at something like this and go, yeah, that's actually feasible?
Well, you look at Ukraine. I brought Ukraine and Venezuela up for specific reasons. And oftentimes we hear, well, that could never happen here in America. Well, I'm not so sure that that's a true statement anymore.
Anybody who went through the 60s knows that's not true, because we had riots. It
was pretty bad, but it wasn't nationwide.
No, it wasn't nationwide, but I mean, still, that gives you an example of how it starts. I mean, in the Ukraine, it's mostly in Kiev, but that's because everybody went to Kiev.
Yes.
And it will spread. I mean, and that's kind of like the campus riots. You always have things.
You look at Greece, and everything happened there as well. We are a larger country, but we think just because we are America and our history, it can't happen here. I got news for you. We got the same human nature as they do anywhere else. Under the right or wrong conditions, it could happen here.
Absolutely. And that's this week's program. We'd like to thank the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers and Ed Nail for allowing us to broadcast from his offices in Concord, New Hampshire. We'd also like to thank, I keep forgetting people's names, Darren McKinney for coming on the program earlier, and Ed, of course, for coming in and updating us on what was going on. Next week, we'll have Karen Testerman back on the show and some other guests. And, of course, moving forward, we'll be here every week, hopefully, to give you 2 hours of news and information you could only get from GraniteGrock.com.
Thanks for listening to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrock.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative website. We'd like to make you an offer we hope you can't refuse. Do you have a local group or nonprofit? Do you have your own cable access show or podcast? We'd like to promote you right here on Grok Talk for free. You can send us your own 30-second audio promo, and then we'll play it during our podcast. If you'd like to take advantage of this opportunity, please email Steve at GraniteGrock.com. If you have comments or suggestions about this show or would like to recommend a guest, just email Steve at graniterock.com. Since Jeanne Shaheen took office, the federal government has added $7 trillion to the national debt. There are more people still unemployed than when she took office, and 2.4 million Americans still can't find work. Most of the jobs that are actually created are only part-time. For the small price of $7 trillion, Jeanne Shaheen made millions of jobs disappear like magic.